All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into the world of Evo 2.
Evo 2.
Yeah, you know how AI is being used for, like, everything these days? Like,
Yeah.
predicting what we're going to buy on Amazon,
Hmm?
finishing our sentences in emails. Well, Evo 2 is doing that, but for DNA. It
Wow.
can actually read and write genetic code just like that.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. So Evo 2 is what's called a biological foundation model, and it's been trained on this massive data set
Okay.
called OpenGenome 2, which has over 8.8 trillion DNA base pairs from all sorts of organisms. So we're talking bacteria, plants, animals,
Oh, wow.
even those viruses that infect bacteria, bacteriophages.
So it's not just human DNA. It's learned, like, the whole
Exactly.
language of life across the board.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so powerful. So by learning from such a diverse data set, Evo 2 can actually predict the effects of mutations on proteins, RNA,
Okay.
and even entire organisms. And it uses this thing called a likelihood score, so basically how likely a specific sequence is to occur. So if a mutation happens, the model can see how that change affects the likelihood, and it can show us whether it was a good change or bad change.
Hold on. So it's like Evo 2 is predicting how a tiny change in DNA can snowball into a big change in, say, a protein's function.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
It is, and it gets even more impressive. So Evo 2 can also identify essential genes.
Huh.
So you know how some genes are absolutely critical for an organism to survive?
Yeah.
Evo 2 can figure those out by basically simulating what happens when that gene is disrupted. It's like a virtual genetics lab.
Okay, this is like some serious science fiction stuff we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But how does it actually work? Like, is it just a black box spitting out predictions?
No, not at all. So researchers have actually figured out how to peek inside Evo 2 and understand kind of how it's making its decisions.
Oh, wow.
So they're using these things called sparse autoencoders, which are kind of like special algorithms that can uncover the hidden features that Evo 2 has learned. And what they found is pretty amazing.
Okay.
So Evo 2 can identify exons, introns, even those regulatory bits of DNA that control like when genes are turned on or off.
It's like it's reverse engineering the logic of biology itself.
That's a great way to put it.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's not just mimicking patterns, it's actually understanding the underlying rules, and it can even distinguish between different genetic codes.
Wait, what?
So different organisms, especially like simpler organisms, they can actually use slightly different dictionaries to translate their DNA into proteins.
So there are, like, dialects of DNA.
Exactly. And Evo 2 can tell the difference. So, for example, it knows that the mycoplasma code, it uses different stop codons compared to the standard code.
Okay.
That level of nuance is what makes it so groundbreaking.
So we've got this AI that can read DNA like a pro, even understanding, the nuances between different species. But can it actually do anything with that knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. Remember how we were saying it understands the grammar of DNA?
Yeah.
It can use that knowledge to generate entirely new sequences.
Wait, hold on. It can write new DNA, like from scratch.
Yeah, it's like an AI Mozart, like composing symphonies.
Okay.
But instead of music, it's creating the blueprints for life.
What kind of stuff can it create?
So we're talking complete mitochondrial genomes,
Oh.
which are like the powerhouses of our cells, bacterial genomes, and researchers are already using it to design DNA sequences with specific properties.
Yep.
So for example, like controlling how accessible certain parts of the DNA are.
Okay, now that sounds pretty technical.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little?
Yeah, so think of DNA as a long, tangled thread.
Okay.
Sometimes it's really tightly wound up, and sometimes it's more loose.
Oh.
And this tightness affects which genes are active.
Oh, right.
So it's called chromatin accessibility. And Evo 2 can actually design DNA sequences that control this tightness, which can influence which genes are turned on or off.
So it's like giving Evo 2 a blueprint and saying, like, build a DNA sequence that makes this gene more active.
Exactly. And that ability to fine-tune gene expression, I mean, that just opens up this whole new world of possibilities for synthetic biology.
Okay, this honestly blowing my mind, but what makes Evo 2 so much better than previous attempts at this? Is that like a huge leap forward?
Yeah, you're right, it is.
What's the secret sauce?
A big part of that comes down to its unique architecture. So it uses this thing called striped hyena too.
Striped hyena.
Yeah.
Sounds like a
I know, right?
a little wild for a technical term.
But it's super efficient, so it uses a combination of these things called convolutions and attention mechanisms. And basically, this allows Evo2 to analyze vast amounts of data very quickly and accurately.
So speed and accuracy, that's the winning combo.
Exactly.
But let's get back to this idea of context. You mentioned earlier that Evo2 has a huge context window. What does that even mean for DNA?
Yeah, so basically that means that Evo2 can look at up to 1 million DNA base pairs at once.
Wow.
And understand how all of those individual letters are related to each other across that whole stretch. It's like reading a novel. Instead of just like flipping through a dictionary, it's actually understanding the plot, the characters,
Wow.
the entire story that DNA is telling.
It's not just memorizing sequences, it's like learning the language.
Right.
And understanding the meaning behind it.
Precisely. And that's why it can do things that previous models could only dream of.
Huh.
It's not just predicting like individual mutations. It's actually understanding the whole system.
So we're not just like reading the language of DNA anymore. We're actually learning to like speak it, write it, compose with it.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it opens up so many possibilities. But before we get too carried away, let's kind of take a step back and look at the training process. So how did they actually teach Evo2 to understand the language of DNA?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get lost in like the what and forget about the how.
Yeah.
So what was the training process like? Like, did they just feed it a bunch of DNA and hope for the best?
Well, it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. So remember that massive open genome 2 data set we talked about?
Yeah.
They actually use a technique called next token prediction to train Evo2 on that.
Next token prediction.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's similar to how like language models are trained, like the things that are powering your phone's autocorrect or those chatbots that can like hold conversations.
So they're treating DNA like a giant text document.
Essentially, yeah. So the AI learns to predict the next base pair in a sequence.
Okay.
Based on the ones that came before it. So by doing this over and over again on trillions of base pairs,
Wow.
it starts to like internalize the patterns and rules of the genetic code.
It's like learning to read by sounding out words, but on a genomic scale.
That's a great way to put it.
That's wild.
And the training process is actually divided into 2 phases.
Okay.
So in the first phase, they focus on shorter sequences. So it's kind of like teaching Evo2 the individual letters and nerds. And then in the second phase, they expand the context window to 1 million tokens. And this lets Evo2 start to understand the bigger picture. So like reading whole sentences and paragraphs instead of just individual words.
So starting with the alphabet and then graduating to novels.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And this 2-phase approach is crucial for developing a model that can both like understand the fine details and the big picture of the genome.
This is also fascinating, but with a tool as powerful as this, it seems like there are bound to be some ethical concerns. So are there any like safeguards in place to prevent Evo2 from being used for, harmful purposes?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very important one. I think the potential of Evo2 is incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
But you're right, we have to remember that any technology this powerful could be misused.
Yeah.
The good news is that the scientific community is very aware of this. And there are ongoing discussions about the ethical implications and the potential safeguards needed to ensure that Evo2 is developed and used responsibly.
That's reassuring to hear. It sounds like the potential benefits are enormous, but it's equally important to proceed with caution and, have these ethical considerations in mind from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Before we move on, though,
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand this million tokens thing.
Yeah.
Sounds impressive, but I'm still not quite sure what it means in practice.
Right. So it can be a bit abstract.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. Imagine trying to understand a sentence, but you can only see one word at a time.
Okay.
It'd be pretty difficult to grasp the meaning, right?
Definitely. You wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
see how the words relate to each other or
Yeah.
the overall message of the sentence.
Exactly. And that's what it's like for most AI models that analyze DNA. They have this really limited view of the sequence. They can only consider a small number of base pairs at a time. But Evo2, with its 1 million token context window, can see the equivalent of like a whole paragraph or even a page at once.
Oh, okay.
So it can
Oh, that
see,
changes things.
yeah, it allows it
Like
to,
big time.
yeah, see the bigger picture, understand those complex relationships between different parts of the genome, which is essential for accurately predicting the effects of mutations,
Okay.
designing new DNA sequences, unlocking the true potential of this technology.
EVO2's ability to see the forest for the trees. That's what sets it apart and allows it to achieve these amazing feats.
Exactly. It's not just about processing data, it's about understanding the underlying story that that DNA is telling.
I'm really starting to grasp the magnitude of this. We're talking about like a fundamental shift in our ability to understand and interact with like the building blocks of life.
That's a great way to put it.
It's huge.
We're moving from like simply observing DNA to actually communicating with it, using its language to design and create new possibilities.
This is all so exciting, but I'm also curious about the practical implications. So how is EVO2 actually being used right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, researchers around the world are already putting EVO2 to work in all sorts of different fields.
Okay.
So, for example, in medicine, it's being used to predict the pathogenicity of human genetic variants,
Okay.
essentially identifying those tiny changes in our DNA that could lead to diseases like cancer.
So it's like a superpowered diagnostic tool that
Yeah.
can pinpoint potential health problems before they even arise.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not just limited to human health.
Okay.
So EVO2 is also being used in agriculture to design crops that are more resistant to pests and diseases,
Okay.
more tolerant to drought, and more nutritious. Imagine the impact that this could have on like food security and sustainability.
Wow. The possibilities seem like endless. But I'm sure there are also challenges and limitations to consider. Like,
Yeah.
is there anything EVO2 can't do?
Of course, no technology is perfect.
Yeah.
And EVO2 still has some room for improvement.
Okay.
So, for example, while it's incredibly good at predicting the effects of small changes in DNA,
Okay.
it's not as accurate when it comes to larger scale genomic alterations.
So like the difference between editing a sentence and rewriting a whole chapter.
Exactly. And another challenge is that EVO2, it relies on existing data to learn and make predictions,
Right.
which means that if there are any biases or gaps in the data that it's been trained on, those biases can potentially be reflected in its outputs.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for like careful consideration of the data used to train these AI models
Right.
and the importance of like ongoing research to address any potential biases or limitations.
Absolutely. As with any powerful tool,
Yeah.
responsible development and use are paramount.
Couldn't agree more.
And that brings us back to those ethical considerations that we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
And so in the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we'll be kind of delving deeper into these challenges and opportunities, exploring how EVO2 is being applied in various fields,
Okay.
and what safeguards are being put in place to ensure its responsible use.
I am definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
This has been an incredible journey so far.
It has.
EVO2 is truly like a groundbreaking technology with the potential to revolutionize our understanding of life
I completely agree.
and open up this whole world of possibilities.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be in the field of biology, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for EVO2
Yeah.
and the field of AI-powered genomics.
We'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsors
Sounds good.
to continue our deep dive into the fascinating world of EVO2.
Yeah. Welcome back to our deep dive into the fascinating world of EVO2. Before the break, we were talking about how EVO2 is being used to predict the effects of mutations and even design like entirely new DNA sequences.
It really is mind-blowing how this AI is changing the landscape of genomics. But I'm also curious about the practical application. So how is this technology actually being used in the real world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the most promising areas is personalized medicine.
Okay.
So imagine getting your entire genome sequenced
Yeah.
and then using EVO2 to predict your individual risk for developing certain diseases. So this could lead to earlier detection, more targeted treatments, and even preventative strategies that are tailored to your unique genetic makeup.
That sounds like the ultimate in personalized healthcare.
Right.
But wouldn't that raise some privacy concerns?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about like incredibly sensitive genetic information.
You're absolutely right. Data privacy is a crucial consideration when it comes to any technology that deals with personal information,
Right.
and especially with something as sensitive as our genetic code.
Yeah.
So it's essential to have robust safeguards in place to protect this data and ensure that it's only used for legitimate purposes.
That makes sense. So it sounds like there's a lot of potential for good,
Yeah,
but we need to be mindful of the ethical implications as well.
exactly. It's about striking that balance between progress and responsibility. And speaking of progress, Evo 2 is also showing great promise in the field of drug discovery.
Oh, right. We touched on that briefly before the break. So how exactly can Evo 2 help us develop new medicines?
Well, as we discussed, Evo 2 can actually be used to design entirely new proteins
Okay.
with specific functions. So these designer proteins could be used to create more effective drugs with fewer side effects.
So it's like having a molecular toolbox
Yeah.
where we can like create custom designed tools to target specific diseases.
Exactly. Moving from trial and error in drug development to a more precise engineering-based approach.
So moving from a shotgun approach to a laser-focused approach.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And this same principle can be applied to like other fields as well.
Yeah.
It's like agriculture.
Right.
We talked about how Evo 2 can help design crops that are more resilient, more nutritious. That seems like a huge win for food security and sustainability.
It is. Imagine being able to design crops that can thrive in harsh environments, resist pests and diseases, and provide more nutrients per plant. This could have a transformative impact on global food production.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about all the positive ripple effects that this technology could have on so many aspects of our lives. But I also want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about potential biases in the data.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So, as with any AI model, Evo 2's performance is heavily dependent on the quality and diversity of the data that it's trained on. So if the training data is biased or incomplete, those biases can actually be reflected in the model's outputs,
Okay.
which could potentially lead to inaccurate predictions or even discriminatory outcomes.
So it's like the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If we train an AI on biased data,
Yeah.
we're going to get biased results.
Exactly. So that's why it's so important to be mindful of the data that we use to train these models and to actively work towards addressing any biases or limitations. It's an ongoing challenge, but it's crucial for ensuring that these powerful tools are used responsibly and ethically.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that, even though we're talking about cutting edge technology,
Yeah.
we still need to be guided by human values
Absolutely.
and principles.
Technology should always be a tool for good.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility to ensure that it's used in ways that benefit humanity as a whole.
Well said. Now, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about Evo 2's ability to understand different genetic codes.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit more about what that means and why it's so significant?
Yeah, so as we discussed, different organisms can use slightly different dictionaries to translate their DNA into proteins. So for example, some bacteria use a different set of stop codons compared to the standard code used by most organisms.
So it's like different dialects of the same language.
Exactly, and what's remarkable about Evo 2 is that it can recognize and differentiate between these different genetic codes.
Okay.
So it's like having an AI that's fluent in multiple languages.
That's incredible. But why is this so important?
Well, for one thing, it means that Evo 2 can be used to study a wider range of organisms,
Okay.
including those that use non-standard genetic codes.
Okay.
So this opens up all sorts of new possibilities for understanding the diversity of life and potentially even engineering new organisms with unique properties.
That's fascinating. It sounds like Evo 2 is giving us a whole new set of tools to explore like the incredible complexity of life.
It is, and it's also helping us to understand the evolutionary history of life on Earth. So by comparing the genetic codes of different organisms, we can trace their lineage and gain insights into how life has evolved over millions of years.
So Evo 2 isn't just about designing new things.
It's also helping us to uncover the secrets of life's past.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for both discovery and creation, allowing us to both understand the world around us
Wow.
and potentially shape the world of tomorrow.
It's amazing how this one technology is bridging the gap between these seemingly disparate fields of study.
It really is, and it highlights the interconnectedness of all living things and the power of AI to unlock new frontiers of scientific understanding.
This has been an incredible journey so far, and I'm eager to hear more about the specific applications and challenges of EVO 2.
Yeah.
So what can our listeners expect in the next part of our deep dive?
Yeah, so in the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve deeper into the world of synthetic biology
Okay.
and explore how EVO2 is being used to design entirely new biological functions.
Okay.
We'll also discuss the ethical implications of this technology and what safeguards are being put in place to ensure its responsible use.
Sounds like we're in for another mind-blowing discussion.
Yeah, I think so. I can't wait to learn more about the possibilities and challenges ahead.
Me neither. It's an exciting time to be at the forefront of this technological revolution.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to share these insights with our listeners.
Well, I, for one, am on the edge of my seat.
Great.
But before we jump into the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
let's take a quick break to hear a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back with more on the fascinating world of EVO 2.
Welcome back. We've spent this whole deep dive talking about EVO 2.
EVO 2?
Yeah, this incredible AI that is like fundamentally changing how we understand DNA. It's like we've gone from like reading the book of life to actually being able to write in it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And in this last part of our deep dive, we're really going to focus on that writing part. So EVO 2 isn't just about analyzing existing DNA.
Right.
It's about creating new possibilities through synthetic biology.
Okay, so this is where it really feels like we're stepping into like science fiction.
Designing new, like, biological functions.
Yeah.
It sounds almost like too good to be true. So give us the rundown. What can EVO 2 actually create?
Well, remember, EVO 2 has learned these fundamental rules of biology, like the language of DNA, so it can actually use that knowledge to generate sequences that have never existed in nature.
So it's not just like copying and pasting existing genes. It's
No.
like composing brand new ones from scratch.
Exactly. And those new genes, they could code for proteins with entirely new functions.
Like what?
So imagine proteins that can break down pollutants in the environment,
Okay.
create biomaterials with unique properties, or even act as these tiny, like, molecular machines.
It's like having this molecular toolbox
Yeah.
with custom designed tools for like almost any problem.
That's a great analogy. And the applications are pretty much mind-boggling. So in medicine, we could design proteins that target cancer cells with pinpoint accuracy, deliver drugs more effectively, or even repair damaged tissues.
It's like having a microscopic repair crew for our bodies.
Exactly.
What about beyond medicine? What other fields could benefit from this?
I mean, honestly, almost any field you can think of. So EVO 2 could revolutionize energy production by creating bacteria that convert sunlight into biofuels more efficiently.
Okay.
It could lead to breakthroughs in material
How
science
does that?
by synthesizing new materials with like unprecedented strength or flexibility. It could even help us clean up the environment by designing organisms that break down pollutants.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see like the potential here, but we got to talk about the elephant in the room. We're
Yeah.
talking about engineering, like life itself. Aren't there some serious ethical concerns with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The ability to design new biological functions is incredibly powerful. And with that power comes a huge responsibility. We need to be very, very careful about how we use this technology.
So like what are the big questions that we need to be asking?
Well, for starters, how do we ensure that these new creations are safe? So thorough testing and rigorous regulations are absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
We also need to consider who controls this technology and how we prevent it from being used for harmful purposes.
It sounds like there are a lot of like really tough conversations that we need to be having like right now.
Absolutely, yeah. The scientific community, policymakers, and the public, they all need to work together to establish these really clear ethical guidelines and regulations for synthetic biology, because this is a field that's moving incredibly fast, and it's essential that we're thinking about these issues from the very beginning.
I'm glad those conversations are happening.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that, even with groundbreaking technology like this,
Yeah.
we need to proceed with like caution and wisdom.
I completely agree, but let's not lose sight of the positive potential here.
Yeah.
So EVO 2 isn't just about creating new things. It's also about understanding the complexity of life that already exists.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the like what ifs and forget about like the incredible insights that Evo2 is already providing.
Exactly. And its ability to analyze these vast amounts of genomic data, it's helping us unravel the mysteries of evolution,
Okay.
uncover the genetic basis of diseases,
Right.
and gain a deeper understanding of how all living organisms are interconnected.
It's like we're finally starting to like grasp the full like complexity and beauty
Yeah.
of the code that like makes life possible.
Absolutely. And one area where EVO2 is making particularly exciting progress is in the study of the epigenome.
Okay, the epigenome, we touched on that earlier, but can you give us a quick refresher?
Yeah, so the epigenome refers to all of the chemical modifications that can happen to DNA
Okay.
that affect which genes are turned on or off without actually changing the underlying DNA sequence itself.
Gotcha.
So it's like a layer of control on top of the genetic code,
Right.
and it plays this huge role in how our bodies develop and function.
So it's like the software that runs on the hardware of our DNA.
That's a perfect analogy. And EVO2 is helping us understand how the epigenome works, how it's influenced by environmental factors,
Right.
and even how we might be able to manipulate it.
Manipulate the epigenome. That sounds incredibly powerful, but also like a little bit scary, to be honest.
It is a powerful tool, no doubt, but with careful research and ethical considerations,
Yeah.
manipulating the epigenome could have enormous benefits. So imagine being able to treat diseases by switching certain genes on or off,
Quite.
improving crop yields by fine-tuning their responses to environmental conditions,
Wow.
or even enhancing human capabilities.
It really is a whole new world of possibilities.
It is.
But as you said, we need to proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Make sure we're not messing with things we don't fully understand.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of the potential consequences,
Yeah.
both intended and unintended, because this is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And we need to navigate it with humility and respect for that intricate web of life.
It sounds like we're at this like pivotal moment,
Mm-hmm.
you know, standing on the cusp of these incredible breakthroughs, but also facing like some really big questions about how to use this power responsibly.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. EVO2 is a testament to human ingenuity
Yeah.
and our ever-growing understanding of the world around us.
Mm.
But it also serves as this reminder of our responsibility to wield this knowledge wisely and ethically.
Right.
So as we continue to explore the mysteries of life, let's do so with a sense of wonder, caution, and a deep appreciation for that delicate balance of nature.
That's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
You know, EVO2 is a game changer, but it's up to us to ensure that it's used for good.
I completely agree. It's an exciting time to be alive, and I, for one, can't wait to see what the future holds for this incredible technology and for the field of biology as a whole.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of EVO2. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of science and technology.